EAGLES, Eagles.
Good morning, Eagles fans. It is OTA day. We are all been waiting for OTAs to start. A little bit of May Eagles news, Eagles action going on today, so that'll be good stuff. Johnny Mack will be heading down to NovaCare after the show ends today. 12:45 OTA start. A couple other things happening in Eagle land. A little bit of slight comments against Vic Fangio from a former Dolphin player Johnny Mack and I will get into. And then two good guests today, Mike Gil and BLG. So a good Wednesday show planned on Birds 365 for you guys today. Johnny Mack, how you doing this morning?
Doing well. Yeah, big day. Happy OTA day. Obviously, it started Monday, but, you know, when nobody can see it, when the tree falls in the woods, so to speak, it doesn't get as much publicity. So good to see the rookies and the veterans together for the first time. And, you know, this is step number one, so to speak. So at least we'll be able to envision where the Eagles are kind of starting from a depth chart perspective. And I think we have a pretty good educated guess at most positions, but good to get some certainty from that aspect of it, sir. And it's a necessary part of the process.
Yeah, so good stuff that we'll be able to get out there today. Johnny Mack will be able to watch the practice, see what he takes away. So we'll have a good Thursday and Friday episode of Birds 365. I want to welcome everybody in on the chat room. Brett, Robert, Mike, Tyler, Wolverine, Cody, Otto. We appreciate you all being here. Johnny Mack, let's start with those comments from Javon Holland, former Vic Fangio player down in Miami. Kind of calls Vic Fangio not a good person.
Yeah, that was unnecessary. Javon was one of the guys before kind of intimated certainly that he wasn't exactly unhappy when Vic left, and there's, you know, speculation whether it was fired or not. They think it was fired down there. Obviously, they kind of came to a mutual decision because the Dolphins knew he wanted to be here, and all of that doesn't really matter when it comes to the fact that I think he's going to help the Eagles. But you do have to have, you know, this is his 40th year in professional coaching. Started in Philadelphia in 1984 with the Stars. It'll continue. And he got asked these questions at his introductory press conference about a new generation of players, and he gave some of his thoughts. And, you know, they're different, good, bad, or indifferent. They're different. And he's an old school guy with an old school approach, and can that resonate in the modern day? It's a legitimate question, but I got to tell you, the bad person, you know, nobody's a bad person because they're trying to, you know, get you to work hard. They're trying to get you to buy into a defensive system. And, you know, this isn't the first coach where it's my way or the highway, and he doesn't want to hear what the players, they're not defensive coordinators. So I think there's blame to go on both sides, but what Javon Holland did is uncalled for, basically. And it was framed when he was talking about the new DC, Anthony Weaver, who is much younger than Vic, early 40s. You know, he was a former player himself, pretty good player, second-round pick out of Notre Dame, played in the league 7-8 years. It hasn't been that far, him out of the league. I think he's got a better understanding of those younger players and the younger generation. And he comes from a good defensive system as well in Baltimore. So we'll see how things work out for the Dolphins. I'm sure they're happy, and I know the Eagles are happy. So it would be nice if people like Javon Holland could just turn the page. But look, they didn't like him. Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, secondary players. So it's something to keep an eye on. I'm not going to pretend it's not something to keep an eye on, especially because you have younger players coming in this year for the Eagles in the secondary.
Yeah, sounds good. Seems like we're having a little bit of tech problems this morning, so I hope everybody can see the show. All right, if you're in the chat, let me know, just because there's something going on our end. So we'll keep plowing through it. Hopefully it gets all caught up. The tech world, Johnny Mack.
Looks fine to me. I have no idea. Everything looks a-okay to me from my side. So
Yeah, it says we got nobody watching on YouTube, and I know that that's not true.
oh,
As our
tech
people are
problem
in the
from that.
chat.
Yeah, that
Um,
standpoint. I see.
so, Johnny Mac, one other thing I wanted to run you by in this opening segment before we get to Mike Gill, and this seems to be I'm starting to see it a lot on social media right now, and I just want to get your perspective and what your opinion is on this. PFF ranks Jalen Hurts 9th overall quarterback in the NFL. To top it off, Dan Orlovsky, I don't know if you saw that clip of him on Pat McAfee's show. He kind of, didn't have Jalen Hurts above Trevor Lawrence. He says Jalen Hurts needs to reprove it, almost like a top 15 type of ranking. And Emmanuel Acho earlier in the week says he's good, not elite, not good enough to get you to a Super Bowl. Just where do you have Jalen Hurts ranked? I think PFF at 9 is appropriate when you look at the guys they have in front of him. Mahomes, Lamar Jackson 2, Joe Burrow 3, Josh Allen 4, Justin Herbert 5, Dak Prescott 6, Matt Stafford 7, Aaron Rodgers 8, Jalen Hurts 9, CJ Stroud 10. That's their top 10. I just want to get your opinion on where you have Jalen Hurts ranked.
I haven't done a ranking recently, so I'm just going off
Just
the
roughly,
top of
yeah.
my head. So that sounds where I'd have them. Cusp of top 10 or late top 10, somewhere 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that range. I think that's where he belongs, coming off last season. Some of the guys, when you talk about Dan, I mean, Dan was obviously a former quarterback. Sometimes I don't get those guys who have this wild gesticulation from,
Right.
oh, he's great one year, he's not great, especially somebody who played the position. And I don't know where Dan had him coming off the Super Bowl season. I assume it was higher than he has him now, and that's okay. But if you're like 2 and then you're not in the top 10, I don't think that's very credible because and certainly my point with quarterbacks more than Emmanuel, they understand that it takes other stuff. You can't do it by yourself.
Right.
And generally, when Patrick Mahomes doesn't win the Super Bowl, if that ever happens again, or Tom Brady didn't win the Super Bowl, that didn't mean they were playing poorly necessarily. I would say Tom Brady's best team, he didn't even win. The 16-0 team. That was the best team he ever had, the best he's ever played, the best team the Patriots ever had, and they didn't win the Super Bowl. So that's strange to me when somebody like that does it. Not as strange when somebody like Emmanuel Acho does it because he was a linebacker, and let's be honest, his job is to get engagement and make people interested, and I think that plays into it a little bit as well. But I
Yeah,
think
it's
right
part of it.
now he's 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that range. And there are guys you mentioned PFF. I didn't even know they put it out until you just said it. There's some guys behind him you could argue should be ahead of him.
Yeah,
CJ
like CJ
Stroud coming off
Stroud's a close one.
last
Yeah.
season. Jordan Love coming off a great first season. Brock Purdy, our old buddy Jody Mack would certainly say he belongs ahead of him.
Come on.
Even
Man. I think Brock Purdy's great. I mean, come on. I don't think he's a better football player than Jalen Hurts.
no, either do I. I'm
Yeah.
just saying there's you can make an argument.
Yeah,
though.
I get it.
Jared Goff as well. Jared Goff's way too low. My God, 16. That guy's criminally underrated.
Yeah, he
He's
really
the,
is.
he's
But
the
I would
new
say again on him, I don't know if I see it from the eye test doesn't tell me he's a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. Is he playing great? Yeah, I think he's top.
he's the new Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, it's good comparison.
And Kirk's 15th. Now Kirk is 36 and coming off a torn Achilles. So, but when he was healthy and when he's playing well, he was really good. If you look at Jared Goff, he's that same type of guy. I mean, there's very few quarterbacks in this league that can make the window throws that Jared Goff does. But, for whatever reason, people value different things now. to me, he's criminally underrated, as I said. But the top guys, Mahomes, Lamar, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and those to me would be the top five, not in that particular order. Obviously, I'd have Patrick first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not putting Jalen Hurts in that category. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I'm with you on that. But the one thing I will say that bothers me about it, and I'm with you. I'm not going to go that Jalen is one of those top 5 guys. I think he's close, but he's not there. They don't give Jalen any benefit of the doubt, though. Like, he takes one small step backwards, and now all of a sudden his rankings plummeted. Meanwhile, a guy like, I know Joe Burrow's got great talent, but like, he was out all last year too. Josh Allen has had his problems. Dak Prescott hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years, or hasn't gone to a conference final in 8 years. Matt Stafford, yeah, he's a great quarterback, but he hasn't been great since the Super Bowl. Like, all these quarterbacks get the benefit of the doubt. Jalen has one off year, and it's like, oh, drop. Maybe it's because they don't think he possesses the inherent talent of some of those guys, which I think is fair. That's why Aaron Rodgers is up there. But that bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, Aaron, I should have mentioned he's in a different category because of his age, and
he could be one of the best quarterbacks to ever touch a football.
Yeah, he is. He's the best. I always say Aaron Rodgers, nobody's ever played the position at a higher level. Now, greatest of all time, you have to win Super Bowls and all that kind of stuff. So that's a different equation. But just from at his highest peak, nobody ever played the position at a higher level than Aaron Rodgers. So he's a little bit different. Obviously, he's age and coming off an injury. But yeah, no, I think you got your Eagles glasses on there, Zander. I mean, you got I just mentioned a couple of them. And Jared Goff coming off his contract, especially. You don't think the Detroit fans think their quarterback's disrespected? And years at Brock Purdy. I mean, let's be honest about Brock Purdy, and I'm with you. I think Jalen Hurts is better, but he's got the opposite problem because he was a 7th round pick. Nobody believes in him. His, completion percentage, part of it obviously is the head coach and the scheming and the playmakers. But he has a tough time climbing these lists, even though obviously I don't know what he finished in the MVP race last year, but it was certainly high. Yeah, so a lot of guys. Matthew Stafford has been. I used to. The 2 biggest quarterbacks we probably argued about, Jody and I, were Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford. He thought they both stunk, and I'm like, I mean, Matthew Stafford was so good for so long on a bad team, and I get it. People think, can he elevate that terrible talent? No, he proved he couldn't elevate that terrible talent, although he had a couple outlier years where they made runs and things like that. But people in the league would just rave about him, talk about how good he was. And, when he got a supporting cast, you've kind of seen it. And unfortunately, it's late in his career. He's not even as good as he was. The same thing with Kirk, supporting cast and all that kind of stuff. Now, with Cousins, I would say part of it's his own fault because he's Andrew Brandt, first ballot Hall of Famer, and he never was willing to take even a penny less to potentially help build that supporting cast. So I think that's a legitimate criticism of Kirk Cousins. But as far as playing the position, yeah, again, that guy's unbelievably underrated. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that you can look at and say, and it all comes down to team success. And the Eagles, when they were in the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts was getting his flowers, and they're coming off an historic collapse. So now he's taking some hits. That's just what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
By the way, I think he hasn't moved. He's been, bottom top 10 quarterback in 8, 9. And maybe that's his ceiling as a player. And that's fine. You can win with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't know if that's his ceiling, because I do think when they went to the Super Bowl, I do think whether he is talent-wise, we can argue, but during that football season, he played like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Agree?
Yeah, he did, but again, that comes to the other stuff. Like I would have told you that year, and I did tell people he's not better than Joe Burrow. He's not better than Josh
Yeah,
Allen.
right. I see what you're
I you
saying.
know, did they go further? Did he have a better year? Was he number 2 in the yes? But that's again, they're not. It's not Jalen Hurts versus Josh Allen. It's not Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow. There's 21 other starters that contribute to a win or a loss, and there's multiple role players after that. So this assumption of quarterback versus quarterback. Now, the if you're talking about just the pure elite quarterbacks, there's probably only 5 of them. And he's not in that category, I would say. And
Give
guys
Lamar
like
in that
Matthew
category.
Stafford and Aaron Rodgers were in that category, but probably aren't
Would you put Lamar
now.
Jackson in that category?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Lamar's in it. Lamar's a slam dunk for me. Joe's a slam dunk. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. The one controversial pick, and obviously Patrick Mahomes. The one with a lot of people, because he hasn't had the team success, is Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
He's just ridiculously talented. And if they ever put it together, and I think they will, because I think Jim Harbaugh is a good coach, I think that narrative's going to change pretty quickly. Although he's going to have a short shelf life because nobody likes Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, did you see he's like canceling out music? I'm like, dude, this is the NFL. This isn't college. I
No,
think
but
you got to
no,
treat
but
these guys a little
it's
bit
going to be a
different.
very short shelf life, but he's going to get that team going in the right direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Here's my one gripe with the whole thing. Aaron Rodgers is a better pure football quarterback than Tom Brady, right?
Yes. Well, at his height. Like I
I think
said, at his height.
talent-wise, I think Aaron Rodgers is the better quarterback. But
Yes.
Brady won, obviously, a lot more. I know it's a team game. It's not just a quarterback thing. But I do think Brady possesses some of the traits that maybe Aaron does not, some of those intangible traits that aren't just about dropping back and throwing a football. And to me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm eagle-colored glasses. Jalen does possess some of those traits, some of the, team will to win type of guy. He's motivated. He's focused. He's, no BS, all that stuff. And I think Jalen has that. So I'm okay with him being a 9th ranked overall quarterback if he wins more games and takes us further than the guys who are ranked in the top 5, but don't ever get the job done.
Well, he's, in my top 5, I can't speak to other top 5s. Most of them have gotten the job done. Patrick, obviously, Joe has been to
Patrick
the
is
Super Bowl.
unbelievable.
Josh has made deep runs.
Well, Josh hasn't gotten the job done, but he's made deep runs, but he's never won the AFC.
Well, it's not his. Like, this is the point. Is it his fault Sean McDermott can't navigate 13 seconds at the end of the game where he's not even on the field?
Right.
Like, that's the kind of stuff. And then you say, well, Josh Allen never won. Well, he had you in a position to win if you had any competency to beat, a great team, a great coach, So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And Lamar's a little bit more difficult because he hasn't played well at times in the playoffs. And that's legitimate, for people that want to go down like Joel Embiid. Here's a great regular season player, keeps coming up small in the playoffs. At some point, Lamar Jackson's going to have to do something, and the same with Justin Herbert. And if you even want to go deeper with somebody like Dak Prescott, I mean, they've had tremendous regular season success, but haven't been able to get it done. At some point, you got to get it done. A lot of times it's not your fault. But, as I said, nobody cares. 13 seconds. That's Sean McDermott. Got nothing to do with Josh Allen. Zero. Other than he lifted them to be at that point with a spectacular performance. But he gets blamed for it.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's always a lot of nuance that goes into all of these things. From a pure talent perspective, I do agree with what you're saying. And Patrick Mahomes, holy crap, Johnny Mac. Patrick Mahomes is incredible. I thought there would be a little bit of a break before we had somebody that dominated the league like Brady did. And then we got no break. I mean, it was like passing of the torch. Brady beats him in the Super Bowl, and then it was off and running for Patrick Mahomes. So pretty impressive stuff. League's in good hands. A lot of good young quarterbacks in the league. We just talked about them all. We're going to bring our next guest up, Mike Gil, coming up next after the break. For everybody in the YouTube chat, make sure you drop a like on the show. YouTube is showing. Nobody's watching the show, but I got 25 likes, so I know there's somebody watching the show. People are in the chat box. They're out there. I don't know what's going on with YouTube. So I hope everybody is enjoying the show or at least able to view it. I'm not sure if there's tech problems on the viewer side or just on the streaming side, but we'll try and get that worked out, make sure it's working for everybody. So we appreciate everybody being in here. Make sure you drop a like, show YouTube who's boss this morning. So we appreciate it. We'll come back, bring in Mike Gil, our first guest on Birds 365. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Wednesday edition of Birds 365, joined now by our Wednesday usual Mike Gil. Mike Gil, how you doing this morning, man?
What's up, boys? I'm doing all right. I'm enjoying the thought of training camp being here shortly.
Yeah.
Happy OTA day, Mike.
Yeah.
We're going to be down there. How exciting is that for you?
I was laughing. I said it's Memorial Day weekend, which down here is like, basically like training camp starting. And I said, well, as soon as June gets here, you're basically counting down to July when training camp starts. So it might as well be like the 1 month count. Do we have a training camp date yet? What's that? What they keep?
No, not officially. It'll be late July, obviously, but not official yet.
I feel like everything in sports is like they keep moving it up and up and up and up.
Yeah, you just scared me. I wasn't even thinking about Memorial Day, and now I just realized
Monday.
I'm gonna be driving back in that shore traffic as everybody tries to get down there, Mike. It just you just depress me.
It's Memorial Day Monday. You know, the calendar flips to June. We get to July, and as soon as July gets here, all you're thinking about is when that training camp starts.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Phillies are going to help. I think the Phillies are going to help because
they might,
so
but they might be so far ahead of the pack. I mean, you might just be like, all right, I'm bored of this. I hope not. I mean, just appreciate what you have. But you know, the society we live in only cares about playoffs and big games. And do you win the championship? You know, you win 112 games and lose, and that doesn't go over so well.
Yeah. Well, no doubt about it. It's win or bust for the Phillies. It's always win or bust for the Eagles. What are you most interested in seeing? Obviously, we're not going to learn a lot for guys in shirts and shorts, but a couple players, Zach Bond, I'm interested in because of what Vic Fangio said. We thought he's going to be an edge rusher. Now maybe he's in the all-ball linebacker conversation. The great Isaiah Rodgers, Deion Sanders 2.0, as I like to call him. Where's he going to line up? Is he even going to be relevant? What interests Mike Gil?
We had a long discussion about this yesterday based on something Brian Baldinger had said on Chris Long's Greenlight podcast. And, you know, he mentioned Cooper DeJean about them having a plan and role for him. I'd love to see what it is. I mean, I'm still kind of intrigued by, you know, everybody just assuming he might be a safety. And he's basically saying, I didn't really play any safety at the rookie camps. He's like, so the way I look at it, see what you guys think. You got James Bradbury here. Fine. He's the number one guy until they get rid of him, right? I mean, they're not just going to.
By the way, I'm going to be interested. First guy I'm looking for to see if he's there. I wouldn't be there if I were James Bradbury, but I'm interested to see if he's even there.
Well, I would assume if he's there and on the team, he's probably the guy who gets the first reps out there.
Oh, yeah.
You drafted a guy ahead of Cooper. You had a chance to draft Cooper, who you've admitted you thought was a first-round player. But you obviously didn't think he was a first-round player ahead of the guy that you drafted ahead of him. So that guy would be ahead of you, Quinyon Mitchell, on the depth chart. So as I see it, he potentially is the third outside corner. All right. Well, what about on the inside? Maddox has done nothing performance-wise. He's been health-wise. So if he's healthy, do they just bump him down the depth chart and say, you're not good enough anymore? Rodgers, Tyler Hall. There are three guys who have more slot. Well, Rodgers maybe not as much, but three guys that have as much or more slot experience than you do. Does he usurp any of those guys? So outside of that position, all right, now what? All right, he's not a safety then, you're saying. Then where are you using him? What is he? So I think that's the most intriguing thing for me. And my point is, I do agree that he will be on the field and have a role.
Yeah.
But where is it going to be and as what?
Yeah, it's a good point, Mike. We'll see what they end up doing with Cooper. I'm with you. I think he's going to be on the field, but I don't really see it at safety. I know he can play it, but did they draft him to be a safety? And then you run the risk of, like, if we play him at safety and he's great, are they going to move him after that? I mean, remember, like, Landon Dickerson, you know, he wasn't supposed to be a left guard, but he was so good at left guard, they weren't going to change it. I don't know if the Eagles want that to happen with him.
Yeah, and he said, well, they talked to me a little bit about playing safety, but, you know, I've done most of my work. He said the other day on, I guess, Up and Adams show with Kay that basically, you know, the first spot he's getting looks at is outside corner.
Yeah.
I just mapped out for you why that might be difficult.
And that's where the Eagles scouted him and see him at long term. I think it's pretty simple, Mike. I think it's, look, when you get down to 53, and they want him on the field, I think this year he's going to have to get on the field inside. It might be some slot cornerback. It might be some big nickel as the third safety in obvious passing downs because they don't have any linebackers. So he might be playing a glorified linebacker position. And then 2025, your hope is your two outside corners are Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Go back to last year. Nobody wanted Nolan Smith taking off-ball linebacker snaps, but he had to take some later in the season because of injuries. Sidney Brown, nobody wanted to play him in the slot, but he had to play in the slot a lot because they had so many injuries. Sometimes you got to do that. But you're right. Long term, it's corner, outside corner, and they think he's going to be an outside
He
corner.
was listed on the Iowa website in 2022 of having started 10 games at Leo / I don't remember what they called the other
cash position.
There you go.
Cash position.
So I don't know what that is in the NFL. Is that a edge rusher? Is that a linebacker? Is that a safety / linebacker? What Baldinger said, he said basically he thinks that they drafted him with something in mind. Justin Simmons, similar to like what they did with him, where he's just kind of everywhere. But is that guy everywhere in addition to Bradbury, Maddox, Slay? Is one of those guys out of the mix? Does Nakobe Dean get pushed off the field? Does Devin White get pushed off the field? Who does not exist because he's on the field? Do you still have Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson or Sidney Brown? And like that's what I'm trying to figure out. Which guy doesn't have a role because they need to find a place to put him on the field?
Well, I would start at linebacker because
at least talent.
Yeah, at least in obvious passing situation. I'm talking about obvious pass. I'm talking 3rd and 10, that type of situation. A lot of teams are going that way. A lot, I always bring up Josh Metellus because he plays all over. He played 13 positions. I'm like, there's only 11. They said he played 13. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
And he moves all over the place. So more teams are going that way.
Yeah.
And I think that the Eagles might start him in that because they think he can handle.
Well, and the day after they drafted him, that was my thought, is they traded up to pick him, which means somebody had a voice to say, get this guy because I want to use
Jeffrey
him
Lurie
in a role. Yeah. And if it's Jeffrey Lurie, I don't know what defensive coordinator mind he has, but he sees a role for him. The other guy that Baldinger brought up, and I think is maybe, I don't know, are we not talking about it enough? Is it just assumed that Cam Jurgens is going to step in there because that's the guy that they picked to take that spot? I mean, we're forgetting how important Jason Kelce has been. And you take a marginal center and that guy misses a week or two, and we hear about how difficult the line with the calls and the continuity. This guy's been taking every snap for 12 years.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Because Cam missed 5 games last year, or 6 games. It might have been
right.
6.
And now you're turning this over to a guy who missed time last year and is not Jason Kelce. And the one interesting part about this is that Kellen Moore is new. So he doesn't know what he can and cannot do because Kelce's here. Because I would say if the same play caller's here, does that guy say, well, I can't do this without Jason Kelce being here. I can't call that play. This play's no longer a part of our playbook because of what he was. Or do we just assume Cam Jurgens will be able to run the plays the same
the silver
calls?
lining, I think Cam's going to be fine. I don't think he's.
It doesn't mean that he won't be good, but But he's not going to be Jason Kelce.
No, I mean,
and
that's
what does that mean? You can and cannot do. But what does that mean? You can and cannot do.
A silver lining to that is, guys, Kellen Moore never had Jason Kelce, so he doesn't know. He doesn't know.
That's what I'm saying. He doesn't know what he can and cannot do because he hasn't had the Kens with Kelce. But Nick Sirianni might say, I don't know if you can run that play with who you got here. Although maybe Moore's never had a guy like that and doesn't have those plays in his playbook.
He's never had a guy. There's like 5 centers in the history of the game that are in the conversation with Jason Kelce. So I'm pretty sure Kellen Moore's never had one of those. He had some good centers in Dallas, but not to the level of Jason Kelce. I mean, that's part of it. You don't replace players like that, but he was getting older,
But I do think that it's like, okay, Jason Kelce's gone, and it's almost like he was so popular and he's still like in our mind and we see him around a lot. It's almost not kind of set in that there's a new guy playing a very important position that is just been a mainstay on this team, replacing a guy who's just been
I will say the Eagles don't even talk about it because they have a lot of confidence in Cam Jurgens, a lot of confidence. And the biggest issue I mentioned was the durability because Jason was always on the field, and Cam already missed 5-6 games. I think the backup plan is pretty good because I think Matt Hennessy, he proved he's a starting level center in the NFL, and he just had a bunch of injuries. So it's always a risk when you have an injury-prone player, but as a backup, I think Matt Hennessy was a good plan, good decision.
Yeah.
I think a very good decision.
They've had a lot of good backup plans, but they've never needed them. Hopefully, you don't need them, and Cam Jurgens gets through. And I said, listen, just because a player is a Hall of Fame player and retires doesn't mean the next guy automatically stinks or can't play. That's not what we're saying, or
Aaron
what I'm
Rodgers.
saying at all. Is you asked me some things that I'm intrigued by is the fact that you've got a new guy who's in charge of that offensive line for the first time in a long time. And I don't know that people are kind of like, hey, that might be an issue for the first time in a long time. And that's with Kelsey not having a great year last year. He was good. He wasn't like excellent, but it's still a guy who you have not had to think about at a very important position for over a decade.
Yeah, and I think there's the one thing about that too is there's a lot more than meets the eye at that position, right? Like everybody loves what Jason does getting to the second level, and that's all part of it. And I'm not expecting Cam to be that, but what Jason does on the blitz pickups and at the line of scrimmage and calling out plays and coverages and defense, like I think that's a big part of it too. And I'm not sure how good Cam Jurgens is going to be at that. It'll be hard to tell from watching it on TV, but I think that's a big role that he's going to have to pick up. That's kind of an underrated part of that as well.
And coupled with the fact that he's going to have to get used to a new right guard who he's never played with before. And he might be trying out 3 or 4 different guys. I mean, he might have training camp. It's not like he can get right together with a new right guard because now maybe that's not the case. Maybe Tyler Steen gets plugged in there and he's the only guy that he plays with all training camp. But if you're trying to get a new center to work with the interior, he's going to have one guy on his left that he's going to have a good relationship with. The guy on his right, is it going to be Steen every day, every snap, or is it going to be a different guy next to him where he can't get his continuity with that guy as fast as he wants to?
Javon Holland. We got to talk about Javon Holland, Mike Gil. He's down in Miami yesterday taking veiled backhanded shots at Vic Fangio. Not the first time for Javon Holland. Not the only Dolphins defender who took some shots at Vic on his way out the door. They're all pretty consistent, kind of didn't like the old school approach. It is a new generation. Any concerns that, it's 40 years for Vic in the professional ranks. It's a lot different than when he started in 1984. Guys keep talking about it.
And he doesn't think it's that much different, by the way. You remember his comment?
Yeah. The player. Well, and I thought he made an interesting comment that day where he said he kind of set it up for the players to look good. He said, it's not the players' problem. They're the same.
It's the people around him.
It's the people around them who are letting these players off the hook a little bit. They're not demanding more of the players.
Yeah.
So is that his way of saying, hey, like, I wish I could get more out of these players or demand more out of these players, but I'm going to make the players look good by saying they want to be great. Everybody out here is not letting us let that
kind of rep the organization if you think about it.
The Eagles
have been at the forefront, of scaling things back.
But to go to that, I mean, that's a tough one because not everybody gets along. Certain personalities don't like each other. Maybe he was just in a spot like you could work in a certain place that you just didn't feel like you fit in. You're just not in the right, atmosphere. You work at, say, Barstool Sports. It's a little bit of a frat type atmosphere. Maybe that's not your personality, but you go do similar work at a different place that's doing content. Maybe those people there you like a little bit more or have similar personalities and you're not having that. So maybe Miami just wasn't a spot for him. I can't imagine that every single player in the league defensively doesn't get along with Vic Fangio. I mean, Colin Thompson, we had him on here, and then he was on my show last week, and we talked more about Vic, and he plays offense. But I said, kind of personality he is, what kind of guy he is, and he's like, he's just a quiet guy. Like some people are okay with that, others want we talk about Sean Desai and the role that he had in Jalen Carter's season, as the coordinator, and then getting booted and then bringing Patricia in. Jalen Carter's a guy that would have been the number 1 pick in this draft potentially had he not had some off the field problems. So you're talking about an uberly talented guy who then showed he was an uberly talented guy and then all of a sudden kind of vanished. Did he kind of get mixed up in this whole dysfunction of the coordinator changes and everything that happened on that defense? It's just a lot of personality driven stuff. Like, what kind of role did Sean Desai's personality have in last year's performance from some of these players, as opposed to what John Gannon's personality was the year before, and then Matt Patricia's, and now Vic Fangio. So I don't think what Holland says is just universally to be accepted. I think it's just every guy has a different connection with a different type of
now.
Personality.
If there were, but it was more than Javon Holland. If there were a Dolphins 365 show, there'd be a lot of talk. Oh, there's going to be a problem in the locker room, Mike Gil, because of things that Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, who's no longer there, Javon Holland, and some others said. I'm with you. You get 90 people together. Just round up the next 90 people you meet. They're not all going to like you.
No,
that doesn't. Vic's been doing it for a long time. If it's a problem with the players not wanting to work hard and wanting the best friend, I got to start looking at the generation and saying, well, tough.
Yeah, well, and another, you've got 3 guys to start anyway. Well, really 4. In Slay, Bradbury, CJ Gardner-Johnson, who have excelled with John Gannon. Now, it might not be the same defense and the same calls and the same covers and the schemes, but I would have to imagine, that they would be more welcoming or open to some of Fangio's ideas, being in a defense that's been pretty similar, that they're not going to have to learn a whole new thing and go over some whole new scheme, that a lot of the principles of what they did in John Gannon's defense, where the 3 of them excelled in. I mean, let's be honest. We talk about this a lot. John Gannon was hated by a lot of the fans. Every single guy, almost, not every guy, but almost every guy on that defense had the best season they ever had in their career in helping that team get to the Super Bowl. So I would have to imagine some of those guys are pretty excited to get back to getting into that defense.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out about this, and I go back to, maybe it's an old school mindset, and I'm also open to the idea that it doesn't work in today's era. One of my all-time favorite movies, Miracle, Herb Brooks, first thing he says to the team, I'll be your coach, I won't be your friend. And I don't know, I think that's Vic Fangio's style. He's an old school coach. He's not here to make friends. He wants to coach you hard. He wants to get the most out of you. Now, maybe that doesn't work in today's day and age, but I think that's where Vic Fangio's mind is. And the modern player is a lot different, as Johnny Mack has pointed out many times. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't think it takes away, though, from his ability to be a good coach.
Yeah, and that's a good point, is that, back then, we laugh about this all the time. I coach baseball, and it's like some of the things these kids say, you're like, I couldn't imagine ever saying that to my coach or anything near that around my coach.
I'm scared to death of every coach I ever had.
Yeah, you look at the coaches, like if you said something to that guy that, and these guys now, I mean, the kids are texting you, hey, coach, when am I playing shortstop? Or, hey, when am I batting third? You're like, are you kidding me? Like, what is going on here? I think a lot of the and because, look, the league has trended towards a lot of younger coaches, to kind of connect better, I guess. But that doesn't mean you have look, Vic Fangio has a lot to prove.
Vic's already proved himself as an NFL coach.
He has proved himself as an NFL coach, but I think he has a lot to prove to say that, as Zander kind of pointed out, that, hey, you've been in the league 40 years, that the game's not passing you by. We've seen this game change dramatically.
And he kind of alluded that it didn't change. That was the one thing that John, we talked about that, John, right after he spoke.
I was talking about
I don't think it's that much different. Well,
he knows the game has changed, and that's why I like Vic so much, because he's evolved his defense. I mean, he created this defense that everybody copied, and he was the creator. So I always say I don't want the copy. I want the original. And the Eagles finally have that. We'll see how it works out. Now, I think because so many, and I've said this pretty consistently, so many teams copied Vic, so many teams a lot of teams used it and have gone away for it because it didn't work. And that's what happens in this league. Too many teams copy, offenses get used to it, and then you got to go in a different direction. So I'm interested to see how much Vic evolves the system as he gets. But he's already started. I've talked to a bunch of people in Miami. The whole default setting was sort of quarters coverage. It certainly was with Jonathan Gannon. He's shifted to more cover 9, so he's already understands he's got to evolve, at least tweak parts of it. So to me, that's a good, a hopeful indicator, at least, that Vic is going to get this thing back on track, and I think he will.
The other interesting part about, like, he had a lot of injury problems down there in Miami. Who knows what that defense would have looked like had they not had so many injury problems? Would people be complaining as much, or are you complaining because the talent wasn't what you wanted?
Well, Jalen Ramsey would have been complaining because that's a Hall of Fame player, and cornerbacks who can press cover want to press cover.
Yeah.
So they're always complaining. If you throw them in zone, they complain. They're like the wide receiver divas. If they're not impressed, they're pissed off. So that I kind of put in the background. Devontae Parker, I want to talk about for this reason, Mike. And Zander and I were doing my way too early initial 53 earlier in the week. I didn't even have Devontae Parker on the team. I didn't, by no means was he guaranteed to make this team. I didn't have him on the team. But boy, now that he's retired, and I look at the backups at wide receiver, and by that I mean outside, not inside, they have nothing. Nothing. I mean, he has like 369 career receptions, Devontae Parker, obviously descending player, but he's an NFL player. The group behind him has 1 as they stand right now.
I know.
1.
We were talking about this yesterday, in that, are the Eagles upset by this? How are they viewing this? Like, some guys, it's like, oh, okay, whatever, he retired. Well, like last year, the linebacker that came in, Miles Jack, came in and then decided, I'm not going to do this. Were they like, man, that really wrecks our plans? Like, did they have plans for Parker? And you were saying, I didn't have him on the 53, but at the same time, I said, now they don't have anybody to be like, that's had any experience. Now you're going back to, like, if somebody gets hurt, then what? Because AJ Brown did not play in the playoff game, and you had to play Quez Watkins at that position.
And Quez Watkins is Randy Moss compared to what they have now,
experience-wise, right?
Yeah.
So that was like, to me, it just felt like, okay, he's kind of here in case somebody got hurt on the outside that has some experience there. Now you're going back to square one of, now he might not have made the team because somebody with no experience kind of showed more. But at least you had like a security blanket in training camp there.
Yeah.
So do they bring in a veteran player?
I would think, now typically, Mike, from being on the air with you over the years, everybody throws out immediately Michael Thomas, #no, I always say, Hunter Renfrow, strictly a slot receiver, by the way. So I don't know how that helps you. I would say #no, but they have to bring in somebody. They have to.
Yeah, well, and we went over the names yesterday. I'm sure you got, are you looking for a slot guy or are you looking for an outside guy? I mean,
well, you got to be looking for an outside guy. I mean, now it's become like Paris Campbell's a default setting, but there's no guarantee he makes the team. But at least you have Paris Campbell, and then hopefully Anaya Smith can get up to speed, or who knows? Maybe they'll give Britton Covey a chance. I doubt it, but who knows?
I mean,
those
right
are
now,
inside
Johnny
guys.
Wilson, your only outside backup wide receiver.
Well, they got a bunch of guys, a bunch of big guys. They signed, Howie's been talking about the futures deals. He signed Jacob Harris, Shaq Davis, Austin Watkins. Harris is 6'5". ran a sub 4.4 at 6'5", which is pretty impressive, but he's never done anything. Shaq Davis is 6'5". None of them have done anything.
Right.
And you have Johnny Wilson, who's a 6th-round pick.
Well, they're loving these big receivers right now.
Yeah.
The day 3 picks on this team, everybody's got him like, oh, he'll be fine. These are day 3 picks.
Who is your slot guy? Who's that guy right now?
Paris Campbell.
Right. And that's a guy that's had a lot of injury issues and a guy that you don't have a lot of.
He hasn't done a whole lot in the NFL.
No.
And
well,
I
prefer
year to get better over Paris Campbell.
So both those spots were kind of like veteran players that you were like taking a flyer on, and it almost felt like you were hoping that one of the young guys just kind of passed them, and you're like, okay, we don't need this guy. We brought this guy in as like a veteran to show the young guy that you're not guaranteed the starting spot, but take it from this guy. And then you did. And it's like, okay, now you lost the guy on the outside to do that for. And now you're kind of looking at, do we need another just outside backup, or do we need to get a guy that we think can kind of contribute here based on what they've seen from some of the young guys already? I mean, Wilson and Smith were probably in the rookie, they probably got to look at those guys to see where, I always say, people say, these rookie camps, they don't mean anything or anything. No, not necessarily, but
I think they mean something for the young players.
Right. It's like anything, though. You get in front of somebody one time and that's to know you, and they say, that guy did more than I thought. I want to make sure that I zone in on him a little closer. The next step, which is OTAs. Well, these OTAs don't mean anything. Not necessarily. If there's a guy at OTAs that does something that kind of stands, you know what? I want to make sure I watch this guy even closer now when we get to training camp. So it might not win you a spot or do anything, but it can certainly get you enough notice that the coaching, look, as coaches, they all want to see somebody do something to make me have to keep you.
Yeah, make me notice you.
Make me.
I'll tell you what they want to see. They want to see guys who can ingest the information quickly. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to be on the field. So if you can prove that you can learn the playbook pretty quickly, then they start thinking about, well, maybe we can get Anaya Smith or Johnny Wilson on the field. Maybe we can get Jeremiah Trotter on the field. But if you start this process and you're not picking stuff up, it could hurt.
And that's always a challenge for the guy who is the practice player the game player over the practice player. Where
Kaylee Ringo, a perfect example. And I've said with Kaylee Ringo, that guy's got phenomenal talent. Like everybody's already turned the page to Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I'm like, Kaylee Ringo might have more talent than both of those guys long term. He's so young, but he was bad in training camp. He was not a practice player.
Mm-hmm.
And then they threw him in the games, and it's like, boop, light went on. And he was one of the very few players that looked impressive late last season. And you see his natural ability. He's so fast. He's so long. He's got everything you want from an outside corner. But if he doesn't show up and practice the Vic Fangio, he's got no shot.
Yeah.
No shot.
It's a guy who doesn't test well, but, is smart but he's just not a good test taker. That's the problem some of these guys have. And what do you do with that guy? If Kaylee Ringo can't practice well and Vic Fangio doesn't trust him enough to get him on the field, or you kind of, cut your nose to spite your face in this situation if you're the coaching staff. But look, they have a lot of guys here at that wide receiver position that are certainly intriguing, but none of them have a track record at all. Like you have Paris Campbell,
one reception. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm not talking about the slot guys. And by the way, you bring up Paris Campbell. If God forbid something happens, like my initial 53, I had AJ Devontae, Paris Campbell, the 2 rookies, Anaya Smith, Johnny Wilson, and Britton Covey, the punt returner. That's 6 guys. Smith and Wilson obviously have no history, but that's what you're talking about. And they have 5 5th and 6th round picks, Mike. And it seems like people are counting on 4 of them to maybe contribute.
Yeah,
At that
remember,
point, are you overrating the talent on this team? If that's your expectation,
Yeah, it's a good point.
that 4 out of 5 fifth and sixth round picks are going to be
well,
meaningful.
I think everybody loves the rookies. Like when you get something new
Yeah,
is
it's like a new
is the
toy
thing,
as your
right?
kid. Yeah.
I would say we were talking about this the other day. The Eagles, the one offseason, traded for Marquise Goodwin. He ended up opting out, so you lost him. They drafted Quez Watkins and John Hightower.
And Jalen Rager. Don't forget Jalen. That was the year they
Smith
threw
and Johnny Wilson could be Watkins and Hightower.
Well, they hope they're Quez.
Yeah, that would be a success. Johnny Mac says that all the time. Everybody has high expectations for these guys. If a 5th round pick can be that, I think that is a success.
Yeah. I mean, Quez Watkins as a 6th round pick, he was a 6th round pick to make it through his rookie contract and contribute. At one point was a starter, and he got progressively worse. So I get why people are down on him, but that is a success. If you're a personnel guy in the NFL, you chalk that up as a win. If you get that kind of production out of a 6th round pick. And now it seems like people are counting on him. Now, I don't think the Eagles are by any stretch of the imagination. I think they will bring in another body at receiver, maybe 2, to be honest. It might be a Zach Cunningham, Miles Jack situation, and you hope one does something. But when you talk about Trotter at linebacker, Trevor Keegan at right guard, potentially pushing Tyler Steen, you better hope that's not the case, right, Mike? I mean, that's not what you want.
No, I think you feel better about it on the offensive line, though, than skill position. Like offensive line, you can find those guys that can play a little deeper in the draft. The skill position guys, they are a little bit more diamonds in the rough. I mean, those are like more needles in the haystack where you're like, hey, how many 5th and 6th round wide receivers? I mean, there are some, but how many
Nakuas are there? Yeah.
Right. Come around where you're like, hey, Antonio Brown, holy mackerel. Where'd you find this guy? Not too many of them. And what's up with what happened with Hardman?
McCall Hardman? I think he's still a free agent.
He is. No, I'm saying, was he? Because I know he was with the Jets last year. He got traded to
Kansas City. He got traded back to Kansas City.
Yeah.
He did nothing.
Then I think he caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl, didn't he?
No, he had a little good run. When he was at the Jets, he didn't do anything. But he had a little bit of a decent run. Like, he would be a guy I'd have some interest in the slot, maybe, like as a guy who's,
Yeah, I mean, well, the 3 out, Michael Thomas, no way.
Michael Thomas to me is just we were laughing about like Jimmy Graham had that one year when he was awesome and in New Orleans, and then he gets traded to Seattle, and then he's on Green Bay, and then you're like, they got Jimmy Graham, and you're like, okay. If you could get the Jimmy Graham from 2000, if you're like, dude, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's
like,
so true.
Michael Thomas was awesome. And by the way, a late round was like a 6th round pick, but just hasn't done anything.
2019, he had 149 receptions.
That is insane.
149.
Yeah.
And by the way, hasn't been the same since.
No, and he's been hurt constantly. So, and then, everybody with Renfro had a good year in 2019. Was that 2019? Renfro had a big year.
I think it was 2020. I think.
He had 100 and
now
catches.
He is strictly a slot guy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think he would be. I think he would be a great addition to the team, though, because there's a clear spot for him right away.
I would. I think he's better than Paris Campbell.
That's my point. I mean, he's going to go right in. He's going to be the slot wide receiver. I don't
there's
need
something
him
going on
guy.
with Hunter Renfro because he did, as Mike mentioned, he had 100 catch season 2021 actually. So and since then he's done virtually nothing.
He's had a lot of concussion issues. He had a rib problem.
Yeah.
There was another injury. Oh, he had a sports hernia. And then he had some concussion issues. So,
and he signed a big deal with the Raiders at one point after that season. And obviously was not effective since. And Mike brings up the injuries. Yeah, there was a concussion. That was the Isaiah Simmons play. I remember that. And then there was something else. But
sports hernia. Yeah, sports hernia.
Oh, surgery. Sports hernia. Yeah. And that guys usually recover from that So that
no, they
doesn't
weren't
concern me.
injuries that were debilitating that should be prolonged. But the concussion problem is something, especially with his size and the position he plays, that you would have to worry if that's going to be something that just he keeps.
But
having to
I
deal
think
with.
they need an outside backup. Like I'm not. Look, by no means am I happy with Paris Campbell, but at least he's a professional player. Maybe something happens. They need. I mean, you hope AJ and Devontae play 17 games and into the playoffs and everything's fine. They've both proven very durable. But you saw the difference with AJ Brown when he got hurt. One game,
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah.
The whole
Yeah.
thing changes. And Quez Watkins, for all the hate, he is an NFL level receiver. I can't look at you and tell you that Shaq Davis and Jacob Harris and Austin Watkins are NFL level receivers. And we don't know what Johnny Wilson and Anaya Smith are, but I do know Anaya Smith is a slot guy. So he's not going to help you outside anyway. They need a backup outside receiver of some competence. You're never going to be able to replace AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, but you can have somebody where it's not falling off a cliff, and that's what the Eagles need to find.
Yeah,
Randall
I agree.
Cobb.
The one
How's
thing I
Randall
wonder
Cobb
though
for you?
about the slot wide receiver is I think Kellen Moore is going to use that wide receiver in the slot more than we have in the past 2 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think he spreads the ball around a lot more. And John, based on our earlier conversation, if they're not going to use Saquon out of the backfield much, throwing the football to him, I think it's a bigger year for both Dallas Goedert and the slot wide receiver. Maybe
Have
not.
we gotten anybody say put Saquon in the slot yet?
No, but I'm surprised you haven't got any like more Kenny Gainwell in the slot, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Do
Gainwell was a
not,
guy who
No, I don't want to see them in the slot.
If you want to give the opposing slot corner a day off, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, Gainwell, played a lot of slot at Memphis.
Yeah. That would not be the best. So for all the talk about, and they're very talented. Look, the starting players on offense, very talented group. But the depth, there's some issues to put it mildly.
That's a good point, John. Didn't John Ross, he tried out? Is he out? I know he's, unproven or at this point he's trying out, but is he a guy that could be on the outside, or is
No,
he
he can. Yeah, I mean, he's an outside receiver, and he can run. So at the bare minimum, he at least gives you the ability to stretch the field. But
yeah,
I mean, the Eagles had him in at rookie camp, and they don't even have to cut anybody. They have, I think, 3 open spots right now on the 90-man roster. So they didn't sign him right away. That indicates they weren't overly impressed with what they saw from John Ross. But
right.
now things have changed with Devontae Parker. And by no means am I saying Devontae. I didn't even have him on the team. But now that he's not there, as Mike points out, it was nice that he was there, because the hope was that Johnny Wilson outplays him in the summer. Now you have to count on Johnny Wilson.
Right. It's different.
As
It's
a
a different
6th-round
scenario.
pick.
Everybody needs to wrestle the Brooklyn Brawler before they make it to the next
That's
level.
true. That's a
You know what I
nice.
You need
nice reference.
you need a jobber in there to. Now, the poor Devontae Parker has been labeled a jobber.
Yeah, a jobber who has 369 career NFL
27
receptions.
touchdowns.
Yeah, as opposed to the jobber of Jacob Harris, who has 1.
He
NFL
had his
reception.
best game ever against the Eagles in Miami, 2019.
Yeah, I remember that game.
5 and 2
Yeah.
touchdowns.
He smoked
Johnny
them. He
Mack and
ripped
I
them.
brought that up yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, and the Eagle fans probably, they remember that one game that he had against them and were overly excited that he was going to be the answer for this team in some capacity, and they got ripped from him. He goes into the Frank Gore Hall of Fame, though. Players of who never played a game but signed a contract,
Yeah, Miles Jack being the most recent. You brought him up. Jimmy Kempsky had a great
He got a mention. He got a mention.
Yeah, Marquise Jatavis Brown. Remember Jatavis Brown? I always bring up the crappy linebacker signed
from the Chargers. Yeah.
Yeah. They were talking him up all off season. Oh, he's so fast. Where do you see Jatavis Brown? He retired, I believe, on August 9th. So Long history of this happening. And we'll see. I don't even know if Devontae Parker's going to stick to that retirement, by the way. But we'll see how it shakes out. I would imagine the Eagles are going to bring somebody in. At Mike Gil Show on X, Twitter, 97.3, the Sports Bash, 2 to 6. He'll be talking OTAs. We'll be on the field about 12:45, so you'll have stuff to talk about. You'll be seeing information coming out this afternoon. A lot of people going down the shore, so make sure you tune in to Mike as well. I guess I'll end it with the offense and Kellen Moore and this dichotomy between that, because that's going to be the biggest story to me. How do you mesh Nick Sirianni and his philosophy with Kellen Moore, or do you mesh it? Is this Kellen Moore's show? To me, that's the biggest story of the whole season. That's it. How these guys mesh together.
Yeah, how do they implement the stuff that Nick wants to make sure they keep with the new stuff? They both keep saying that this is going to be something that they can figure out. But at what point do you get frustrated of like, man, I got to keep running this damn play. I got to keep putting this play in my playbook. That's two personalities. We talk about two personalities all the time. You could be best friends with somebody and still not agree with them and get into an argument and say, I don't agree with you on this. Why are we running this play? It doesn't work, dude. Stop giving it to me. How many times does that happen until you have some sort of friction? Who knows? But yeah, that's definitely something. Is how different is this offense going to aesthetically look, and the complete principles are going to be different, or is it going to look very similar with a lot of Nick Sirianni influences? That'll be 100% a story.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing it. Honestly, Johnny Mac and I have been talking about it a lot. I don't know. Is it Nick's offense? Is it Kellen's offense? I guess we're going to find out. Johnny Mac, real quick question before we let Mike go. Did Nick Sirianni hire Kellen Moore? I got into a debate yesterday on Cilio's show about this. Was it Nick Sirianni who chose Kellen Moore, or was it the people upstairs who chose Kellen Moore?
Nick's decision. But Nick, how I describe it is Nick is a political animal and realized that he understood he had to make a change. And then it became, I do think Cliff Kingsbury would have gotten the job if he was amenable to coming in with basically, one or two guys on the staff, and he wanted a little bit more, and then they shifted to Kellen Moore. But I do think it was technically Nick's decision. But if Nick came in and said, hey, I'm keeping Brian Johnson, Nick would have been kicking rocks like Javon Holland on Instagram.
Yeah. All right, Mike, thanks for joining the show, man. Make sure you guys follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Gil Show. Listen to 97.3 ESPN down the shore. Mike, bigger audience this weekend. Everybody's coming down the shore.
Yeah, man. A lot of pressure on you. Bigger. It's always big, though. Number one in the market for how long? Yeah. Football at 4.
I don't remember. Number one. I'm getting old. I don't remember
100 years, I think. I take great pride in that.
Dominating the South Jersey airwaves, as always. Mike Gil, we appreciate it, man. Have a good day.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, bud.
There's Mike Gil joining the show. Johnny Mac and I will take a break now. We'll come back. We have BLG, Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation, coming up in about 10 minutes. Johnny Mac and I will come back, and we'll kick around some more OTA talking points. Some of the things Johnny Mac mentioned there to Mike Gil interested me, so we'll talk about them. Coming up next, stay tuned, everybody. Looks like, by the way, before I get to a break, looks like YouTube is starting to come back. I don't know what was going on this morning, Johnny Mac. I don't like to see that YouTube's taking our views away. That's our bread and butter, man. That's what we need. We need those views. So YouTube is taking them this morning. If you guys are in the chat box, make sure you drop a like so we know you're in here. We appreciate it. And as always, we'll keep giving you the content each and every day. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be coming back hour number 2 next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. Wednesday's edition of Birds 365. Johnny Mac, I want to stay on the receiver point. Let's bring up Cali, baby. Look at all this receiver talk. I remember the James Thrash and Todd Pinkston days. We're getting spoiled.
You don't even got to go back. I mean, the Carson Wentz set the franchise record for passing yards without having a receiver go over 600, I believe. This team really struggled at that position before they drafted Devontae Smith and traded for AJ Brown. Really struggled. I mean, really struggled. And that's part of the problem. They haven't had a lot of success developing young receivers in recent years. In recent coaching staffs. Now, Devontae Smith was the notable exception, but that dude was a finished product.
Yeah.
And Nick Saban and the Alabama crew deserve a lot of credit for that. It's like I said, you can't replace players like that. So it's kind of silly to think you'd have another AJ or Devontae laying around. That's not what depth is.
Yeah, right.
Depth is about competency and being able to get winning football out of you have to go about it a different way. But you have winning football. They don't have anybody with any proven. You can cross your fingers and hope about Johnny Wilson. Again,
you're relying on an extremely unproven player who's never played it down in the NFL. Yeah.
And Jacob Harris I think played 18 games, but mainly as a special teams player, because he's really fast. And I think he has one reception. Shaq Davis has nothing yet. Austin Watkins has nothing yet.
Is there anybody out there, John, that can be like a don't I don't want to say this the wrong way. That can be like a Devontae Smith where, and I don't mean that talent. I don't mean the talent level. I mean, Devontae is a versatile receiver in that you could line him up in the slot. You can line him up outside. He's better outside, but somebody that can kind of do both, or is that highly unlikely?
Not at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, then is there any option then to fill the role you're
AJ
talking
can
about
do that
trading?
as well. That's part of the joy of having two receivers like
Yeah,
that.
I
Is
think
the
they're
fact
going to
that
line up in the slot, honestly, a couple times this year at least.
yeah, they can line up all over the place. But
Yeah.
now, and you're talking about some of the best wide receivers that signed this year were Calvin Ridley went to the Titans. You know, if you want to talk about franchise tag guys, you had T. Higgins, Mike Evans. Mike Evans ultimately signed. Michael Pittman. Um, and then you got down to the Gabe Davises and the Darnell Moonies of the world. So, you know, generally great receivers don't get to that open market.
Well, we're not looking for great though. I mean, then you just said that we're not looking for Devontae and
No,
AJ.
but
We're
when
looking
you're
for
that's what I'm saying is guys who can move all over and play a bunch of different positions.
yeah,
You're
right.
never going to find that.
They're a higher
Um,
caliber of player.
You know, right now the best free agents out there are Michael Thomas, and you know we don't even know where Michael Thomas is health wise. Hunter Renfro, we just talked about health wise. McCole Hardman, we talked about. To me, he's a manufactured touch guy, slot guy. Corey Davis is the one guy I looked at. That's who I talked about as a potential Devontae. I can't believe I'm talking about Devontae Parker replacements, but here we are. Whatever. It's Spurs 365.
Well, you are right though, because at the end of last season, you saw what happened when AJ Brown missed one game. So if that's a problem you're trying to address, this is how you need to address it: replacing Devontae Parker.
And Corey's a pure outside receiver for those who remember, and they should remember because same thing, Devin White, right? Devin White is forever good in certain people's minds. Well, guess what? Corey Davis was the number 5 overall pick, just like Devin White in his draft, the 2017 draft. So he's 6'3", just like Parker, outside receiver, natural outside receiver, competent player. Now he retired last year, but he's only 29. So he was with the Jets, not, not great, but solid, 32 receptions, 536 yards, almost 17 yards of reception as a third receiver type. Didn't live up to the contract. Obviously they signed him to a big deal, coming off his rookie contract. And he said all of a sudden it was August, late August. He probably wasn't going to make the team, but I don't know. Maybe some Jets. I'll ask a Jets reporter. I had to see what happened, but he announced in late August last year he was taking a break from football, retired, but he always had the intention of coming back. He sort of intimated that, and he did. He applied for reinstatement at the start of free agency this year. The Jets released him, so they no longer own his rights, and he's a free agent. And that's the guy I'd sign, Corey Davis. If he's got, you have to do your due diligence, but he didn't retire because of health issues. I don't know if he kept himself in shape. These are all the things the Eagles would have to answer, but he's the guy. Of anybody out there who's got some veteran, he's the guy to me that would be a fit.
What about Joseph Ngata? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Joseph not. I mean, he's the same as he spent last year on the practice squad. So in theory, he's got a little bit of head start on some of those other guys that I mentioned. But boy, he didn't show. He's another big receiver. He's 6'3". Not the fastest guy in the world. Real tough time generating separation in training camp last year. Definitely an outside receiver, but yeah, I should have mentioned him. I mean, he's in the conversation with Johnny Wilson, those 3 other guys. But again,
yeah. I mean, if he was on the practice squad all year and they haven't talked about him at all, or there's no mention of him, they're probably not thinking.
Been no mention of anybody yet. But if I'm on the phone to Corey Davis's agent, checking in on what the deal is with him, because that would make you better if he's got anything left in the tank. that would make you significantly better. He started 67 games in the NFL. Yeah. And he's not even 30.
Yeah, he's 29. That's pretty good. Let's go to our friend Brandon Lee Gouton in the waiting room. BLG from Bleeding Green Nation joining us now on Birds 365. BLG, how you doing, man?
How's it going, guys?
BLG, good to see you. Well, we're going to talk about OTAs, but since we were talking about it as you popped in, this Devontae Parker situation, it's funny because we did our initial 53, way too early 53, which is kind of laughable at this stage. And I didn't even have him making the team. So full disclosure, I'm not excited about Devontae Parker. But now that he's gone and you look at the backups, outside receivers, there's nothing, BLG, nothing. You're talking about Joseph Nada, who Zander brought up. You're talking about Johnny Wilson, the 6th-round pick, and a bunch of futures guys. I just mentioned Corey Davis, who had that weird retirement. He's only 29. They got, no matter who it is, though, BLG, they got to bring in somebody, don't they? Veteran body.
Yeah, I think they will. It is a little funny. Like, it's true. Like, more than one thing can be true. The depth not great. A lot of teams would kill to have one of either Devontae Smith or AJ Brown, let alone both of them.
Yes.
So it is a good, it's still obviously in a good spot, relatively speaking. But yeah, certainly, I mean, if something happens to one of those two guys, and not trying to jinx anything, but those guys have obviously been remarkably healthy the past 2 years, then yeah, you're not looking at as deep of a group all of a sudden, looking really thin, really fast. And yeah, I do think they're going to address that in some way. I did have Parker in my 53, but it was, it was close between him and Campbell. So yeah, not certainly a can't lose kind of player, but more significant than not at all.
Yeah, we've gotten spoiled, BLG. Johnny Mac and I just brought up James Thrash and Todd Pinkston. All of a sudden, now we're looking for a wide receiver 3 after 2 of the best in the league.
Well,
so,
and by the way, BLG points out, I also had it down to one of the two was going to make it,
right?
Campbell or Devontae Parker, and I took Campbell because he's more of a slot guy, and you need the slot guy. Devontae Parker can't play in the slot, so. I thought anybody, BLG, that was talking about him as the potential wide receiver 3, I thought they were way off base. They weren't going to play that guy in the slot. I guess you could move Devontae inside or even AJ because they have that versatility and play Devontae Parker outside. You could go about it that way. But he was never going to be a slot player.
I think it's interesting the type of receivers they added this offseason, including Parker in there. It's kind of like Parker and Johnny Wilson kind of have that same profile as more of these, bigger bodied prototypical X receiver size and guys who aren't going to be high volume targets, but potentially could be big play guys on the outside. Not necessarily known for generating separation, but being able to make plays on the ball in the air downfield. And obviously the counter to that is, the Paris Campbell and Nia Smith, more of the prototypical slot kind of gadget touch receiver guy. And I thought it was kind of interesting. They added, 2 kinds of molds of those players. And maybe that talks or lends to like mixing and matching those skill sets in the offense, or, I don't know exactly how they plan to roll that out.
BLG, earlier in the show, we talked a little bit about Javon Holland, former Vic Fangio player in Miami, made some kind of sly comments about Vic Fangio, alluding to him, I guess, not being a good person, which, that's a shot to me. Is he a good coach or is he not? But what do you make of that? I mean, do you think that's going to be a problem? Vic Fangio has kind of mentioned, I don't think the game has changed that much. He's definitely an old school coach. I brought up my favorite quote from my favorite movie. I'll be your coach. I won't be your friend. Herb Brooks in Miracle. I think Vic kind of has that feel, but is that going to be a problem with the modern NFL, modern player?
I think it bears monitoring for sure. I mean, there's been enough chatter about it. I don't want to say this because the Dolphins players are complaining. They're definitely right about it. And, there was a quote from Drew Rosenhaus that, this offseason, some players certainly didn't like Vic in Miami, but some other players really did. You've seen Justin Simmons have some really nice things to say about Vic Fangio, about their time together in Denver. So I don't want to just say that, all players hate him automatically, but I do think certainly you might rub some people the wrong way based on what we've seen. Maybe that won't be as an issue in Philly. Maybe he's a good fit with the players here. But it is worth monitoring, I think, especially as it relates to, Nick Sirianni. Everyone doesn't want to hear about the core values he talks about, but, connection is, one he emphasizes. He actually called it the Eagles' #1 core value back at the Combine this year. And he said they're going to triple down on those core values. So I think I'm kind of more interested in how, that dynamic works there with Sirianni, talking about connection and everything. And then Vic Fangio, who kind of just seems more about, let's get the work done.
Yeah. And, to me, it's about a generational thing. This will be Vic's 40th year in the professional coaching ranks. So, he's a senior citizen. He's 65 now. Can he connect with younger players? But I don't like the fact that was a backhanded shot about being a good person. There's plenty of people who think Vic Fangio is a great coach, great player. So I don't, there's some bitterness there for whatever reason. Hopefully that doesn't manifest itself in Philadelphia. But you did your sort of things to look for at Eagles OTAs. First practice today, open to reporters over at bleedinggreennation.com. So everybody should check that out from BLG. Give us the top 2 or 3 that you want to see with the first time the Eagles veterans and the rookies are together this year.
Yeah, I think one of the more intriguing things is where does Cooper DeJean line up? Because there's been so many questions about that. Yeah. I'm going to guess, we'll see him at, I think, more cornerback than safety, but exactly, where in terms of the outsider slot. I mean, I would lean towards the nickel role maybe, but really intrigued to see that. I know, he wasn't the Eagles' first round pick, but the Eagles, were really excited, obviously, to get him based on all those draft video things they put out. And, I think he could be a really interesting player for this team because of that versatility, and kind of want to see how much Vic Fangio puts on his plate from the jump. So I think, really the secondary as a whole, because, where is James Bradbury here? We don't know that, right? Is he?
Yeah. By the way, if I'm advising James Bradbury, I've said all week, I'm not showing up. If I'm James Bradbury.
I don't think. Why would the Eagles want him here either? And I mean, because if any reps he takes, it's reps the young guys aren't getting. And if he gets hurt, then that's not a good spot to be in with the contract and everything. So I think both sides have a benefit from him not being there.
Yeah, Jeffrey Lurie might step in and say, Cooper DeJean, he's our starting slot cornerback based on that draft video. Jeffrey Lurie might have a say in that one.
I mean, they like him a lot. Obviously, they think he checks a lot of boxes. So, I mean, a lot of these depth chart things, I think that's kind of what we're going to see today in terms of like that. What does the wide receiver 3 rotation kind of look like there? Right guard, obviously. I'm interested to see how linebacker looks, especially with Vic Fangio mentioning that Zach Bond.
Yeah, that's he might be my #1 guy. As crazy as that sounds. I'm like, I want to see where Zach Bond lines up. I'm very excited for that. Because look, I think he's an off-ball linebacker. Is Vic kind of intimated that he thinks he can play there. I think he's in line to be a potential starter. I really do.
He was the first guy Vic mentioned when he was asked about the off-ball
I said to
linebackers.
Johnny Mack a couple weeks ago, like, Johnny Mack, if you told me a couple weeks ago the #1 guy everyone would be talking about going into OTAs is Zach Bond.
I don't know if everybody's talking about that.
No, but I do think there's been a lot of talk about him ever since Vic had mentioned him, and now you see social media talking about him. There's a lot of talk about Zach Bond out there.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. And even if he's that flat defender, which Howie intimated he was, Vic uses that a lot. And that's a meaningful position as well. And Andrew Van Ginkel last year with Miami had a great year in that role. And that's who Howie sort of compared Zach Bond to. So that to me is one of the most interesting storylines. Another one you mentioned, BLG, is right guard. For this reason, I think the Eagles fail safe, sort of their Stefan Wisniewski of the new era, is Matt Hennessy. But he's also the backup center.
Yeah.
So if he's on the second team playing center, he can't take right guard reps. How does that affect that sort of battle. It's not important today. It's the first day. But as you
Right.
go through later in the summer, will it be a situation? Well, they know what Matt Hennessy can do if he's healthy versus let's see what if Trevor Keegan can push Tyler Steen.
Right. It feels like it almost like could work against Hennessy in a way because
because they need him to be backup center.
Yeah, if he's going to be needed there, that's going to limit the reps he can get. But I think they're really high on Tyler Steen, or at least, I think he's going to be given, a legitimate chance to win this thing. We'll see today if there ends up being any kind of rotation there. Like last year, there certainly wasn't. It was just Cam Jurgens' job from the jump, and we thought there was going to be a competition with Steen, but there really wasn't. He was never really in the first team. So I think they're going to give that kind of look to Steen here, but he's going to have to earn it. And if he's struggling, then certainly they are going to look at other options there. But for now, I do think they have a lot of confidence in him.
Somebody I'm looking out for, and he might not have a big role in the team this year, but I'm still waiting to see how he looks, or how you guys, the reporters who were down there, say he looks, is Mekhi Becton. I've heard we had Phil Simms on the network who I mean, when I say raved about him, I mean like he spoke about this guy like he's going to be a stud. He's in the perfect spot. We had Brian Baldinger on. Brian Baldinger raved about him. Like I'm curious to see, does this guy still have a lot left in the tank? He's a young player. He was drafted very high. He obviously has a lot of talent. He's had his injuries. He's had his problems, but Jeff Stoutland has shown he can do wonders. I wonder if Mekhi Becton could have a role in this football team, almost immediately. Maybe he's a potential right guard candidate. I don't see it, but I guess it's possible with Stout.
Yeah, I think the Becton thing's really interesting. Some of those people you just mentioned, I think Baldy specifically kind of talked about like a maturity thing there in terms of what has been holding him back to this point. So I think it's really up to him. If Becton can kind of lock in here, and it seems like he has a good mindset in terms of, it's not like he just said, hey, I only want to go to a team if I can potentially start, definitely start. He's coming to Philadelphia where he knows he probably won't be starting, but has an opportunity to kind of raise his value here and be a very incredibly valuable backup. God forbid Jordan Mailata or Lane Johnson goes down and has an opportunity to play right away there. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see him too. I'm guessing we're not going to see him at guard, at least to start.
Too big, right? I mean, he's big dude.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And
he is really big. I got to see him up close. I don't know if he went up to those Jets practices, BLG, a couple years ago.
Yes.
But he is just massive. And I don't know, because Landon is listed as 6'6", and Tyler, I think, is listed at 6'5", and Mekhi's 6'7", but he looks bigger than those guys. I don't know. I don't know.
2 inches, right? It doesn't look like he's only,
I don't know. You're really impacting at some point. I think Jalen Hurts' ability to see the throwing lanes at some point. I think he'll be a great swing tackle, but I can't see him projecting it at right guard. That's not even bringing into the, it's a different position. You're playing in a phone booth versus outside, and I don't see that fit. But I think he's a great swing tackle for the Eagles. I really do that. And Jeff Stoutland's perfect for him to resuscitate his career. So I think it's a very good signing by the Eagles. It's interesting that Zander brought that up, because I am a little concerned about this pedigree drafting, I called it. Everybody's excited about Saquon and even Mekhi Becton and all these former first round picks.
Devin White.
Well, Devin, I should have brought up first and foremost, because I'm not excited by Devin White. Last year they did it. Kenny Pickett they traded for, and all this that they liked him in the draft, a first round pick. Well, last year they got Marcus Mariota, and last year they got Rashad Penny. Remember how many people were excited about Rashad Penny?
Yeah,
He's a first round pick. He averaged 6 yards a carry. You didn't see him. Terrell Edmonds, first round pick, starter for the Steelers. And even Greedy Williams and Justin Evans. Justin Evans was actually one. He ended up winning the starting job. He just got hurt again, like he always gets hurt. Are they too enamored with this? Again, I called it pedigree scouting. We like so-and-so from 5 years ago in the draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a little like simple. Maybe sometimes to just be like, well, this guy, was a former first round pick, so he must be good. But at the same time, it's like, well, then why is he available? There's a reason, he's available to you,
especially when you're 25 or 26 years old. Yeah.
So, that kind of works against that thinking. And sometimes, I think it's, the mistake of taking a guy that high and then seeing, oh, that didn't really work out, as opposed to, and that's the thing, like, those players got chances, right? It's not like, hey, you're bringing in this guy who didn't get an opportunity and maybe now you give it, so he's kind of like a diamond in the rough, a hidden gem, if you will, where, you can kind of give him that opportunity he previously didn't get, and then maybe there's something more to get out of him because he didn't get that fair shake, whereas these players probably very much did, given their draft status.
Yeah, and Devontae Parker was a first-round pick and doesn't even make it to the first day of open OTAs. But usually those things don't work out. Hopefully it changes and the Eagles get a little bit of a better hit rate this time around. The coordinators you also mentioned, Vic Fangio, we talked about a little bit, Kellen Moore, and obviously we're not going to see a ton of schematic stuff, but do you think we'll be able to see the difference on offense with the motion, whether it's Jalen Hurts under center a little bit more, Saquon, maybe they throw some of those swing passes into the offense? You think there'll be noticeable changes?
Yeah, I'm intrigued because if I'm not mistaken, in the past few years of Sirianni, well, every year of Sirianni's OTAs, we haven't really seen 11 on 11, right, John?
No.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're not, so I don't know if that's different this year, because it seems like there's certainly an effort to practice more, considering they're going to have a mandatory mini camp. Considering, Vic Fangio, he said, they want more practice time. Considering you have 2 new coordinators, I would think maybe they might actually do that this year. But if they don't, and we're only seeing 7 on 7, then obviously, there's a big limit on what we're going to actually see schematically. But I would guess maybe we see enough to kind of like tweak a couple things, but not enough to, certainly have the book on what they're doing.
Yeah. How much do you think Vic Fangio, how much do you think Vic Fangio had to do with the changed schedule this summer? Or do you think it was more of an organizational thing after things didn't go well late in the season last year? They kind of collapsed. Nick Sirianni wants to focus on connection, which they were not good at late in the year last year. Do you think it was Vic, or do you think it was more organizational?
I don't think the Fangio thing was irrelevant. I mean, he said, he was pushing.
Yeah, he said it right away. Yeah.
But I mean, I think, you look at other factors like, the past couple of years, the first year, obviously, of Sirianni era, there was the COVID. You're coming off COVID. There was also, coming off the Super Bowl last year. So maybe you want to go a little bit lighter, considering you went deep into the season. And obviously just leaning into the fact that they've been one of the healthier teams in the NFL. And one of the most devastating things you can have happen at this time of year is, have that season ending injury and lose a player. So, I think, ultimately, there were some things that kind of, and again, 2 new coordinators. Okay. You probably want a little bit extra time to maybe implement those schemes. I think there's multiple factors there working into more practice time.
I liked your BLG. I like your unexpected long shot who pops category. Good Devontae Ballsby pull. Got to go back away for Devontae. Christian Ellis, you mentioned. I always look. Boy, I was trying to remember. Remember, there was that giant receiver from Rutgers. I couldn't remember his name.
This is back in the Doug era still?
Yeah,
or,
Doug. I think it was the Doug era. Or it might have been late ship. Either way. Yeah, Femi Moma. It was a giant receiver. It's always the giant receivers. And then the Rutgers. I can't remember his name to say.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And he got a lot of excitement. And I think Johnny Wilson's going to be the guy this year. He's just so big and so physical. And he's out there in T-shirts and shorts. I think he's just going to be catching the football over everybody, and everybody's going to go, wow, Johnny Wilson. Look at Johnny Wilson. Anybody else you might see that pops?
Carlton Agudosi, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I saw you thinking, and thank you. I could not, and I was Googling it. I'm saying I'm 90% sure he's from Rutgers.
He was,
yeah. and I couldn't find him anywhere.
Yeah, I'm
nice,
trying to think.
Nice job. Nice job.
I've been like thinking about like who is that guy, who's gonna pop like kind of from out of nowhere. I think Ben Van Sumeren, like I don't know if he counts. He was on the roster a little bit late last year, did some things on special teams. If I'm going someone like totally new, someone who I think like Eagles fans don't even know by and large, like is on the roster. Maybe it's like Tyler Hall, like in the slot there, had some experience with the Raiders.
Yeah.
So he's probably coming into this offseason with the expectations of someone just like, a futures signing, a UDFA. Like he has legit NFL experience. So, maybe, he's in the slot there and he's making some plays. And, at this point in the offseason, like it's a passing camp to some extent. So, that's the kind of position I think that could excel. Maybe he makes some plays on the ball and pops and like, Bosby or like Christian Ellis, doesn't really factor in at all in any meaningful way, but stands out at this time of year.
Yeah.
BLJ,
it is a passing camp. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
No, go ahead, John. You're good.
Well, running backs, I was going to say, because you can't find anything about running backs other than what they do in the passing game.
Right.
Which certainly fits Saquon, certainly fits Will Shipley, certainly fits Kenny Gainwell. But I, for the life of me, it's so redundant with those three guys as far as skill sets. And I'm not comparing, Will to Saquon. Saquon's obviously more talented. He's more gifted, but they're all the same type of back. And I'm like, I've always wanted to see, and I probably mentioned to you in the past, a one-cut downhill north-south runner behind this offensive line. You saw it a little bit with Jordan Howard at times, but you haven't seen it recently. And they got three guys. They signed an undrafted kid from Georgia, Kendall Milton. They have Ty Davis Price, who's one of those futures players. The Eagles talked about it a lot this offseason. And then Lou Nichols, who had been here on the practice squad. And they're all that type of guy. They're all big backs, north-south runners. But we're not going to learn anything about those guys until the pads come on, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's always it's kind of like frustrating to me, at least sometimes when the Eagles run the ball in practice. I get they have to do it, but from an observation standpoint, there's only so much to be gained sometimes. Obviously, you can see what's going on with the offensive line or whatnot, but I mean, it's kind of just a little silly when the defense can't do much to the running back. Limited knowledge that we're going to get,
and the offensive line too, for that matter.
Sure,
you really can't get a feel for the offensive line is either. It's frustrating for those guys. That's why I think you have about 1 million receivers coming out in the draft, because that's all they do in the offseason. Yeah,
for sure.
It's tough, but anyway, I digress.
Yeah, yes. I don't like we just, John, you just talked about it with the types of backs the Eagles get. I don't know why they don't just get a north to south runner. I got asked the question yesterday on the National Football Show. What's a better tandem, the two new tandems of quarterback running back, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley? Like, to me, Derrick Henry fits the quarterback there so much better than Saquon Barkley fits with Jalen Hurts. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't know why the Eagles, I would have loved to have signed Derrick Henry. I think he would have been a perfect back that would have actually taken pressure off Jalen Hurts. But the Eagles they do not want to go that route. They have shown who they like at running back.
Yeah, they clearly have a type. And it's a
clearly.
little, I was a little surprised, by the Shipley pick from a standpoint of just like, okay,
you're
drafting.
Yeah.
You're drafting Kenny Gainwell's successor. Like, that's something that you have to do. Like, really? Like, but they like Kenny Gainwell a lot. So,
yeah. And they just like it's funny to me from a personnel perspective. So basically, we're talking about Howie and the personnel staff. They only value running backs who can be 3-down players. So they need to pass protect and they need to catch the football, but they never utilize the running. They have great receiving backs. You don't know it because they didn't use them. Kenny Gainwell was a great receiving back coming out of college, and he even played some wide receiver at Memphis to the point he was so good. DeAndre Swift BLG, you could argue he's a better receiver, just a receiver. I'm not comparing them as players than Saquon was, and Saquon is.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't know it from his status in the Eagles offense. So do they need to get on the same page, the personnel staff and the coaching staff, when it comes to running backs, their scouting?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, I wonder how much too is the Jalen Hurts factor. Obviously, not like a guy who's gonna always check down to the running back as much as he would just take off running himself, which I think
shows
adds
he doesn't
to it.
like to do it at all.
Yeah, so I think that's a factor too. I think maybe in a perfect world they would like to do that more often conceptually, the coaching staff. But when the player has a preference, that also needs to be factored in.
BLG, take out Zach Bond from the equation. What player are you most looking forward to seeing on the field today?
I'm gonna say, I mean, I said Cooper DeJean earlier, but I'm gonna loop Quinyon Mitchell in here too. Because if James Bradbury isn't here, well, all of a sudden that opens up an opportunity for him to potentially be with the first team from the start, which is pretty intriguing to me because you don't always see rookies in that spot, and maybe he won't be. Maybe it's Isaiah Rodgers or Keely Ringo or Josh Jobe or Eli Ricks, whoever.
Yeah.
But it would say a lot to me, if Mitchell is there, considering how coaches can be reluctant to play rookies with the first team and kind of want to make them feel like they have to earn it. So if Mitchell is there, and regardless if he isn't there, I'm still intrigued to see him, because this is a setting where we just talked about, like, the running backs who are bigger aren't going to thrive in. You're not going to learn a lot. I mean, a player in this setting, I would think would thrive with no pads on and stuff. Just a guy who played a lot of off coverage in college and was really good at that.
Yeah.
I would think Quinyon Mitchell has the ability to stand out in these kind of drills.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Bryce Huff today. I want to see. I know you're not going to learn a lot about Bryce Huff, but I think it's one of the biggest question marks coming in. Everybody's assuming Bryce Huff is just going to fill the role of Hassan Reddick.
I hope he drops, and I hope they have 11 on 11s, and he drops in coverage so I can tell everybody.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
Yeah. At Brandon Gouton, make sure you follow BLG on X and Twitter. Read him at Bleeding Green Nation. I'm going to predict, you just mentioned, knowing Nick, it's going to be Ringo or Ricks. If Bradbury isn't there, one of those two guys is going to get the first rep, and Quinyon Mitchell's going to have to earn it. But
if Bradbury,
I don't have a problem with that.
Is that a big? Is that a?
Well, I love
Bradbury rolls in there today.
Full disclosure, and I'm sure BLG is the same. I love James Bradbury. Great guy, tremendous professional. Wouldn't surprise me if he showed up.
From that perspective, John, I agree. Like, I could see him, just because he's such a good professional guy like that. He's like, if I'm under contract here and they have an event or they have an OTA, I'm going to it. I could see that.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I'm with BLG in that it's probably better for him and the Eagles if he stays away. And it is voluntary work, so he's not holding out or doing anything he's not supposed to do.
Right.
And if I were advising him, I would say, James, look, man, don't bother showing up until, because he sees the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Give me a percentage. The odds James Bradbury's on this team week 1, BLG.
Yeah, I think it's like 1%. Like, it's just, they have so many corners. There's so many bodies. And it's just like, how does he fit in?
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, like, I would love to know how transparent teams are in this position. Like, do you think the Eagles brass has talked at James where it's like, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. Obviously, we can't cut you before June 1st. We're going to try and find a trade partner, or is it just like, you don't talk to him at all? You let him.
Well, I think drafting a corner at 22 and one at 40 is pretty transparent. I think it takes care of itself. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much there's direct talk with the player, but certainly Howie, has a reputation for, relationships, and I'm sure he's, talking to the agent at some level, or is at least kind of in communication in that regard.
Yeah. And difficult situation, but you're right. And if James is not going to be a starter, you can't keep him because he's not going to help you on special teams or anything of that nature. So, maybe you wait it out until August and hope somebody else has an injury and is willing to give you a day 3 pick, and maybe that's how he's planned.
Or maybe not you're going to get anything great, but like, a receiver, like a guy who can be something
player
like
for
Devontae
player,
Parker.
Yeah. A lot of ways you can go. But the human nature part of it comes in, the human aspect, and obviously James sees the writing on the wall, so that part of it's difficult as well. Again, at Brandon Gouton does a tremendous job covering this team. You going to be down there today for the
I'll be there.
Exciting festivities. I will see you there.
Nice.
I will not see Ober BLG, but he's the only one who's going to be taller than Johnny Wilson.
That's
with
right.
The wide receiver group.
BLG, they might call your name. They might put you at wide receiver.
Yeah. They like those lengthy receivers.
The type they're going for there.
They like those lengthy receivers. So BLG could be in the mix.
We'll see.
All right. BLG, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thanks,
we'll catch
bud.
up with you soon.
Thanks, guys.
See ya. There's BLG joining the show. Johnny Mac, we won't take a break. We'll just put a bow on the show. What are you looking forward to going down there today?
Zach Ball. Isaiah Rodgers, we mentioned a little bit there, a little bit interested to see where he is because they added so many outside corners. Before the draft, I would have said he'd start outside. Now he might start inside because you have Mitchell, DeJean,
right?
You have also Ringo and Ricks in their second
your take
years.
on Ringo is interesting to me. Like, if he's not a good practice player, which I'm fine with. I mean, if he performs in the game and if he has talent, but like, what's his path to getting on the field?
I don't think he has a path.
You know?
He's got to hopefully he learns from last year, and hopefully, he's very young. He was, I think, the youngest player in the draft last year, and he's I don't even think he's turned 22 yet. So, he might be younger than.
That's really young. Is he 22?
He's still 21. He's still 21. He turns 22 on June 27th.
Wow. Yeah, that's super young.
So I think he's probably younger. I'm not going to look it up, but he's probably younger than the rookies this year. He is extremely, extremely gifted. And I get everybody gets focused on where people are picked, and he ended up going in the 4th round. Probably should have stayed in college. If he would have stayed in college, he'd probably be a 1st round pick this year, and everybody would have a different take on him. He is, I would argue, more gifted than the corners they drafted this year.
And he is younger than Quinyon Mitchell. He's not younger than Cooper DeJean, but he's younger than Quinyon Mitchell, who's already 22.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'2". He's got everything you want from an outside corner when it comes to length. He runs a sub 4.4 at that height. And you saw him when they threw him into the deep end of the pool. He's just tremendous recovery speed. He's very gifted, but he did not play well in training camp. And if that continues, he's not going to play with Big Fangio.
Barring an injury where he gets thrown into it, if you can't play in practice, how are you going to show, especially a coach like Vic Fangio,
The point is he's got to approach practice like he approaches games. Maybe he learns from that. Maybe he learns from the struggles last year, and it kept him off the field. Ricks actually got a chance to play before him, which was not a positive sign. And then all of a sudden he got a chance to play, and he lapped everybody. He's all I can say is he's very, very gifted. I'm very high on that.
Yeah, I mean, and for the college football fans out there, I know not everybody is, but he was a very, very good player at the University of Georgia. Very good on a good defense. I mean, he could really play. Let's get to our James Carver drop. This is super chat, so I want to hit on that real quick. J Mac and Zander, especially given Bama ties. Do you see Eagles' possible trade of couple CBs to get Mechie from Texans as wide receiver 3 outside? I like it. I like Mechie. He's another Bama guy. He had a tough break when he first got drafted. I think he came down with cancer. Is that correct? Right when he got drafted.
Yeah,
he did beat.
Well, so a lot of the health stuff comes into it. Look, I'm open to anybody at this stage. They need to add somebody with some experience, and John doesn't even have a ton of experience.
No, he doesn't. Yeah, no.
He was able to come back last year and play most of the season. So good for him as far as that goes. Yeah, I mean, I would love a player like that. He's young as well. I don't know where Houston is. Obviously, they have very good receivers, and they're an ascending team. Why they would want to give up on him, in essentially his third year, I think. So they have 2 more years. He was a second round pick, so they have 2 more years on his rookie deal. To me, that's not the type of player I'm trying to give away. Now if they have a bigger need at corner, they're pretty good on defense as well. That's maybe the best young team in football.
Yeah, they're
A lot of it.
their quarterback, man. That's CJ Stroud, boy. I like him a lot. Yeah, James says they have a wide receiver problem, like we have a corner problem with a lot of numbers. But here's the thing. Here's the thing I wonder, John, because normally I don't think player for player trades are likely. You don't see them a lot. I just don't. But I'm going to be interested to see how Howie handles some of these guys that, maybe he starts to get an understanding of who's going to make the roster. Like, does he just cut some of these corners? Does he try and spin them for value to maybe a cornerback needy team? Like, I don't love, like, if you're just going to cut a guy like maybe Eli Ricks or, I think he's going to make the team. But just as an example, a guy that can play, a guy that's had game snaps in the NFL, a guy that will probably have a spot on somebody's roster, do you just cut him or do you try and like spin him for a late round pick or?
Well, I think the best case is try, and that's why. But again, you have to take in the human effect, and he kind of sees the writing on the wall, and you're always trying to get something for somebody.
Yeah, and maybe other teams know that too, and they're just going to wait it out.
And the Texans, boy, the Texans are deep, man. They are really deep at receiver, and they brought in obviously Stephon Diggs, and
yeah,
they already had Tank Dell, and yeah, they're extremely deep at wide receiver, even down to they brought in. I don't know why they brought in Ben Skoranek, who's been with the Rams. He's more of a special teams guy, and Robert Woods is a veteran player. Nico Collins, they're loaded at wide receiver, but they're pretty loaded everywhere. That's a good team. That is a good team, right? And that's how quickly it can happen in the NFL when you find the quarterback. And they should be a legitimate contender this year. Now you're in the AFC, so you got to deal with Patrick Mahomes. So that's more difficult, but they look pretty, and they drafted Kamari Lassiter at cornerback in the second round. So, I don't know where they are.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a great fit, but hey, I'm open to any names at wide receiver.
It's probably more likely that you send a pick. If let's say the Eagles do want John Mechie, I don't know if a cornerback is going to get it done. Maybe Eagles would have to send a draft pick over to get somebody like that. But we'll see how it plays out. Boy, that Texans team is going to be good. Johnny Mac, D'Amico Ryans has done a really good job with them.
Yeah, he has, and we talk about younger coaches, newer generation. D'Amico's done a really good job early. I remember talking to D'Amico at Eagles camp and over the years, and you knew there. I mean, Chip used to call him him and Jordan Hicks. What is the Lion King? Mufasa, and what's the little one? I forget, but
I'm not a big Disney guy, so I can't.
Yeah, Mufasa. Yeah, and he really did a great job. But Jordan Hicks was a team leader. You could see he had coaching in his future if he wanted it, but boy, he hit the ground running and became a head coach really, really quickly.
Yeah, and CJ Stroud, he looked phenomenal last year. I think it was his rookie year too, and he led that team. They put up a good run, and they had a good game in the playoffs too. So that'll be interesting to see how good that team is this year. But Johnny Mac, just real quick before we get out of here, what's the schedule today? So just so everybody in the chat knows exactly when to expect it. I know they're scheduled to start the OTA at 12:40.
12:45-ish is the start of practice. You'll start seeing some pictures and video if you're following along with reporters. Only for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to get to watch the entire practice. So hopefully they have some team drills some 11 on 11. No guarantees in the past, as BLG has mentioned. Nick didn't do that kind of stuff until training camp. They didn't have a mini camp, so hopefully they change a little bit. We'll be able to see a few schematic things. Not going to see a ton of stuff, but it's always more important for the skill position players, as Brandon called it, more of a passing camp. That's what you are at this stage.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good. Yeah. For anybody that is looking for the video, though, Johnny Mac is going to send over the video to me, and I will post it up on our JAKIB YouTube channel so you guys can have a see whatever Johnny Mac is able to capture. I know they do limit how much John can capture, so I don't want to hear anybody bitching. What the heck is this tent? We only have so much.
Yeah, we don't get the video. 11 on 11.
We don't have a full GoPro setup down there running on the full practice, so we're not able to do that. But we will post up what we do get. Johnny Mac, good show today. We're back tomorrow. It's going to be a really good rest of the week. So anybody that's tuned in today, make sure you tune in tomorrow on Friday. Johnny Mac is going to get into what he saw. We're going to be able to put some details, some data, some knowledge from Johnny Mac behind, some information, as he says, behind what we've been talking about. So good stuff. OTAs are officially here, everybody. So should be good stuff. Johnny Mac, thanks for the show today. We'll catch up with you tomorrow, right, man?
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody in the chat. Donald, Mike, SMD, James, the many Jameses there are. James Jones, our Commander fan. He's always in here every day. Shout out to him. Twiz, James. We appreciate everybody. We'll catch you tomorrow on Birds 365. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.